Hi, Ed here with Ed's 2 cents worth. Today I want to let you know about two videos that I'm making. One in regards to mechanical attributes involved in small loaders like this. Also some concerns over some mechanical attributes, as well as some safety that you want to take note of. Now, if you're an experienced equipment operator, you probably already know this. But many of you are persons that are looking for a hobby, uh, something that maybe you can even make a little money on by building these loaders and then selling them, but you haven't ever done it before. So you want to have some information as to how these things are made and what are the concerns that you want to have while making them. Okay? Safety concerns, mechanical concerns. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. In another video, we're going to talk about where to get the materials, where to get the hydraulic parts, the metal, the electrical parts, and so on. So continue watching, please, and we'll try to supply you with all that information that you've been asking me about. One of the things that you want to concern yourself with is loader radius. Now, what I'm talking about here is the movement of the loader in an arc. Okay. Now, this tractor has a fairly low pivot point down here. So basically, when this is out straight, raised up out straight, that's its furthest point away from the tractor. Okay. If this pivot point is up higher, or it's back here up higher, the radius is going to be different than it is on this tractor. But hopefully this will illustrate what I'm talking about. Okay. So watch the bucket as I raise it up and notice how far it is away from the fence right now. Okay. It's just about hitting the fence, just clearing it, just maybe a quarter of an inch. Okay. So what happened? As I raised it, it got closer and closer. In other words, it moved further and further away from the tractor. Well, what effect does that have on the tractor and its performance? Well, for one, if you're carrying a load, depending on how heavy that load, that could affect your traction. Because as you're raising, the load increases. Okay? Imagine, here's my load. I pretend I'm the loader. I've got the load tucked in close, right? Well, I'm pretty stable, right? No matter how I move, I've got real good control. But now when I raise it up, I'm moving away from my body, right? I kind of have a tendency to want to tip this way. Well, it's the same for the tractor. As you move out, it's wanting to raise the rear wheels. When you carry a load, it's very much like a seesaw. When you put a load in your bucket, see like this, what happens to the rear end? If that was my tractor rear wheels down there, they want to lift up off the ground. The heavier the load, the more it wants to lift. And that's why there's counterweights on the back. Look at this illustration. You can see here a much larger tractor being depicted, but the principles are the same. Notice the top tractor. The bucket is lifted up about halfway, and it's closer to that wall. Pretend that red or burgundy colored line there is a brick wall, so it's touching the brick wall there. So that means the bucket is extended further away from the tractor itself as possible. And it has the maximum amount of torsion on the frame, on the front axle, trying to lift the rear off. So you have extra weights put on the back, okay? But under this circumstance, with the same weights as the picture below, you have less traction, okay? Now, if you go to the picture below, you've got the bucket down. There's less torsion on the frame and on that front axle, and you have better traction. Indeed, you have better stability. So then, what you want to realize is that your front axle is very much like this pivot point on your seesaw. The tractor wants to go like this as you're carrying a load, okay? So there's not just a traction issue, but there can be a stability issue. Now, moving on, let's talk a little bit about center of gravity. Now, center of gravity is something that is constantly changing. A human being has a center of gravity. For most of us, it's somewhere right around the top of our hips, right around our navel. That's where and when we're talking about center of gravity that's when your body mass, okay, kind of equalizes. I've got somewhere about the same amount of mass from this point down as I do from this point up, okay? And so it's the equalizing point of my body. Now, as I do things, as I change things, for example, if I take those weights and I hold those weights, then I change my center of gravity. So here I've got my weights. My center of gravity, when it's close, no matter where I go, when it's close to my body, it is fairly stable, okay? But now if I'm like this tractor and I start to change, right, then my center of gravity changes. Where my center of gravity is down low, it's in this area right now. When it's here, it's up around this area. That means it's easier for me to tip. So take a look at our illustration once again. The only thing that's different between the tractor at top and the bottom is the position of the loader bucket. But notice that the center of gravity, the blue line, changes as the bucket gets raised. Which tractor is the more stable? The tractor at the bottom. The center of gravity is low, and that's what you want, that load to stay low, and thus you are more stable. When you raise it up, the center of gravity changes and becomes less stable. The point is, as you raise and lower your bucket, especially when there's a load in it, your center of gravity on the tractor, while you're sitting on it or off it, doesn't matter, it's going to change. Okay? So assuming that you're sitting on the tractor, okay, the center of gravity of this tractor is somewhere in here. Now, for different tractors, it's going to be different, okay? But think about it as probably somewhere above, just above the frame, okay? Depending on your setup, that may not be the case. It could be higher or lower. But on this tractor, it's somewhere right around the frame, right around here. Okay, now as I raise the bucket, the center of gravity is going to come up. Okay, if I raise the bucket really high, my center of gravity might get up here. If I'm carrying a load, that means I could tip over one way or the other, sideways. Okay, so if I'm on an embankment on the side of a hill right? And I'm traveling down that hill this way, and I got that load up in the air. Boop, I'm going to tip over probably. You want that bucket down just as low as you can get it and still travel. That should be a standard practice of operating a tractor loader, even if it's not a loader, even if it's a farm tractor and you've got implements in the rear. It's the same thing. Your center of gravity changes with your implements, with the height of them and the weight of them. So that's a safety concern. You need to understand that and recognize that you can do yourself bodily harm if you're not conscious of center of gravity. So you have to develop that. And it comes, it's not something to be fretful about, just mindful about. So now let's talk about the rear axle. Just like the front axle is a pivot point, like a seesaw, the rear axle acts the same way. It too is a pivot point. And as you put load on the front, the rear wants to come up, okay? So if I can balance that out by placing an equal load across it, then I can keep that rear end from coming up, okay? But because the load in your bucket is constantly changing, sometimes you got a light load, sometimes you got a heavy load. So you got to kind of find a medium amount of weight that goes back there. And usually on a tractor like this, you're going to be somewhere around 150 pounds of counterweight in the rear. And the further out that it is, the more effective it is. When it's up close, it's going to be less effective than it is further out. It's hard to add weight to the wheels on these small tractors to insert weight. You can fill them with windshield washer fluid, which won't freeze easily. You can fill them and add, probably 20 pounds per tire on a tractor this size. On bigger tires, you could do better than that. But you can see that there are certain difficulties in having it perfect. It's not going to be absolutely perfect. You're taking a lawnmower and turning it into something else. Okay? Let me talk about something else that should be a concern for you. So, if you haven't realized it already, you really have something similar to two seesaws that are tied together by means of a frame. Okay? So, let's pretend here that my seesaws are tied together by this frame. Now, the frame on a lawnmower tractor these days, it's extremely fragile. Okay? Without enhancing the frame, without reinforcing it, the load at the two ends is going to be devastating to the frame. Okay? So if I've got my load back here, kind of balancing my load up in the front, you can see what's happening before I even place a load here. That's what's going to happen to your frame. Somewhere along the line, something's going to break. You don't want that to happen. So you've got to, if you're going to use a lawnmower type of tractor, you have to reinforce the frame. You'll notice that the loader is totally in front of the front wheels here. When you look at the bigger tractors, the heavy equipment type of loaders, the loader posts that come up to give you the pivot point are usually behind the front wheels. In other words, there's a double post that comes up with a cross member that's placed behind the wheels, and it distributes the load over the frame more evenly. That can help a lot. The problem on a tractor this size is that it takes up some of the space of getting on and off. You've got to make sure you maintain a total turn radius, so it can't be too close to the wheel, but it can't be too far back, because you've got to have all of this there or some other equivalent, whether it's hydraulic or whatever, and you want to have room to get on and off the tractor with reasonable ease. So that has to be thought out really well, but that can help distribute the load across the frame. Now let's talk about the front axle itself. On tractors like this, these are relatively light duty. When you get into tractors that have a label of like 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 in them, they are going to have the lighter axle in them. Excellent product, not demeaning the product at all. Its intended use, it lasts a long time, but we are perverting its use. So the axle, oftentimes they're stamped out, or they may be made out of cast iron and solid. However, the kingpin part of the axle and the spindle part of the axle, whether it's made in a single piece or whether it's made in two pieces, with the kingpin separate from the spindle, it really doesn't matter. On these type of tractors, they're not as strong, okay? If you can get a cast axle tractor with a separate kingpin and spindle, it's going to be stronger, okay? This setup here is the L shape, and the kingpin and the spindle are made all out of one piece, okay? They've been known to bend. In fact, you can go on YouTube and find videos showing you how to straighten them out. So when you put a heavy load on the front and then you're bumping, going over heavy bumps, what's going to happen? Where you try to turn an extra tight radius, you're going to bend the axle. So they don't have bearings in them, they have bushings, and most of the time those are plastic bushings. What that translates into, when you're carrying a load, the steering wheel is not easily turned. When it's moving, you can turn fairly easy. Enhancement on the front axle, or buying a tractor to begin with, if you intend on going past the 200-pound mark, you need to start with a heavier duty platform. You need a true garden tractor type tractor, okay? You don't need to take a riding lawnmower and convert it. These are great if you just bought a new lawnmower and you want to use the old lawnmower and make a loader out of it. These are great, but consider 200 pounds as being the maximum. When I say maximum, preferably 150 pounds, okay? So keep that in mind as to your choices when you're buying a tractor or using a tractor, as to just what you can expect out of it. So to sum up things a little bit, keep in mind safety issues when the bucket is raised up high. it's going to be more dangerous. Even on flat ground, it's going to be more dangerous than if the bucket was down low. But especially on slopes that you often find in your yards or up next to a roadway or whatever, be conscious of that. Keep that bucket low as you can, as many times as you can. You're going to save yourself some grief if you do. Keep in mind the seesaw effect. The frame is fragile on these types of tractors for a loader situation. They may be okay as a lawnmower, but for a loader, they're fragile. They need to be reinforced. You can put a post in behind the wheels instead of doing the front if you want, but you've got to sink that out really good so that make sure that you've got a turning radius for your wheels and you've got room to get on to the tractor and room for all of your controls and such. Counterweights on a tractor this size with a 200-pound load, somewhere's around 150 pounds. Some tractors may get away with 125 pounds. Some tractors may need 175 pounds, even 200 pounds. Just depends on the tractor. So you want to build that frame back there that holds your counterweights really strong so that if you find that 150 pounds isn't enough, it's got the strength to accept more. And that's the way I built that. I could easily put another 50 pounds on back there and it'd be okay. So just consider those things. Another point of safety is in regards to when you're making a turn. Okay, when you're on a straightaway and you're able to get up to speed a little bit, the inclination may be to turn quickly. That's a mistake. Slow down, turn at a reasonable speed where you can maintain some steering freedom, but don't go full throttle. Okay, especially if you do have the load up in the air. Okay, the proper way to actually do your load is to travel with it down as you approach your unload zone. Start raising it up a little bit so you're ready to unload when you get there. Okay, providing that's a straight shot. If it's a curve, you want to wait till you actually arrive at your unload zone. Taking corners, sharp corners, like would be here if you were trying to go around this fence, never do it wide open. Always slow down to just a crawl, enough to maintain decent steering, and go slow. Think in terms of safety. You don't want to get hurt on one of these things, okay? And if you are in the business of selling them to other people, you want to be able to let them buy it with some confidence that they're not going to get hurt on the tractor that you made, okay? Just some thoughts, some ideas. That's one reason why I seldom make a tractor that goes really high, because I don't want to sell the tractor and then turn around and have someone get hurt because they had their load way up high and they weren't thinking safety and they tipped it over, got hurt. So for people, unless I'm building a custom and the person knows what they're doing, I'm going to build with about a 30-inch, 36-inch height on it. Anything higher than that, I feel like I'm putting an inexperienced person in danger. So I hope this information is going to help you make wise decisions. And if you like it, please click that like button. And I hope that you're going to subscribe, because there's going to be additional videos helping you to get information that you're going to want for your build. Now, here's something to consider. If you lack mechanical, fabricating, or DC voltage experience, get help. Ask a friend, make a friend that would be willing to advise or demonstrate how to do the work that you lack experience in.